Bon dia, Vic. Bon dia, Catalunya. Jo no parlo catalán, pero estic molt content d'estar avui aquí amb vosaltres. This is all I learned after 2 days. So now, let me begin my talk. Let's first describe this title. We are all digital nomads. You all carry cell phones, I imagine, yes? Do you have a response? Are you alive out there? Yes. Okay, good. Let me explain media ecology. Each medium has an impact on other media. And so there's an ecology of all the media. This is an approach that we have taken in Canada, starting with Marshall McLuhan, and it continues today. So I'm going to describe a number of books that relate to digital nomadicism. The alphabet effect. There are 5 concepts that developed in the Western world between the years 2000 and 500 BC, between the Tigris-Euphrates River and the Aegean Sea, not far from here. And they were phonetic writing and the alphabet, codified law, monotheism, abstract science, and deductive logic. The reason I put together these 5 concepts is I was teaching a course in physics, Physica, at the University of Toronto, and I wanted to bring physics to humanities students, to art students, and so I invented a course called The Poetry of Physics, and I described physics in plain language, in English. And I began to study the origin of science. And what I discovered was that most things were invented in China. Paper and porcelain and metallurgy and oh my gosh, so many things. And the question, windmills and water wheels, technology came from China to Europe. And the question, Joseph Needham wrote a book called The Grand Titration, explaining how Chinese ideas helped in the development of science in the West. So I asked the question, why didn't science begin in China? Why did it begin in Europe? And the answer is these 5 ideas, which developed uniquely here in the West. The Chinese have a writing system, but it's not alphabetic. They have laws, but it was not codified. They were spiritual, but they did not have the idea of one God, a monotheistic religion. They had science, but it was not abstract. It was always very practical. And their logic was analog logic, not deductive logic. So what is the effect of the alphabet? Why does it lead to science? Well, the alphabet teaches us the lessons of analysis, coding, decoding, and classification. Let me give an example. Out in the audience, I met Irena. Now, when I hear the name Irena, I immediately do an analysis, and I break her name up into its basic phonemes. I, ra, I, na, a. And then I can represent each of those phonemes with a meaningless sign, the letters of the alphabet. And so I'm always doing analysis. When I'm writing, I'm doing coding. When I'm reading, I'm doing decoding. When I alphabetize a list of names, I'm making a classification. The alphabet is the most abstract form of writing. All of these properties contribute to science because science requires analysis, classification, coding, decoding, and it's extremely abstract. What's the problem? Okay, thank you. Okay. So, I worked with this great man, Marshall McLuhan. By the way, he was my co-author of the first paper I wrote on the alphabet, which we called Alphabet Mother of Invention. He died in December of 1980. And I wanted to continue this kind of research. And as a physics professor, it was hard for me to find money for communication research. So I decided I would study the use of computers in schools. And before I knew it, I was appointed to the Faculty of Education at the University of Toronto, and I began to talk with my colleagues there, who all spoke of the computer as an information processing device. And I said, yes, it's true, but it's also a medium of communication. Well, we argued, and then I said, I will win this argument. The computer is both a medium of communication and an informatic tool. And then I remembered my work with the alphabet. The alphabet also, medium of communication, and it's an informatic tool. It led to science. So then I came up with the notion, then I realized that spoken language are words. Try thinking without words. Now maybe you can draw a beautiful picture, maybe you can sing a wonderful, or hum a melody. You cannot sing a song because songs have words. So all of a sudden, I realized that language, spoken language, is both a medium of communication and it's an informatic tool. So then I began to think about the different forms of language: writing, math, science, computing, and recognized that in each of these there was an aspect of communication and an aspect of information processing. And then I realized that they formed an evolutionary chain. How did writing and math emerge? Well, it emerged in Sumer, and it emerged not because of writers, not because of mathematicians. It arose because of accountants. They wanted to keep track of the tributes that farmers paid to the priests. They had to contribute food to the priest because the priest had to redistribute the food to the irrigation workers, because in Mesopotamia you had to have irrigation in order to grow food. And they couldn't keep track of all this information. There was an information overload. And so they began to make little marks on clay to keep track of who gave what. And pretty soon the system evolved into writing and math. With writing and math, there had to be schools. The very first schools begin in Sumer, 3000 BC, in order to teach students the secret code of writing and mathematics. In English, we say 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. The first schools, by the way, were no different than the classrooms that you attend, not in the Magna Aula, because this is a big room, but in the first schools were rectangular rooms that held 30 to 40 people. There were benches, a bench in the front, like the one I'm sitting at, for the teacher, and then the benches for the students. So schools have not changed in 5,000 years. Now, the teachers began to make long lists to be able to provide lessons. So one teacher made a list of all the animals, and he wound up the head of the zoology department. Another made a list of all the kings, and he wound up the head of the political science department. And pretty soon there was an explosion of knowledge. And to organize this knowledge, science emerges as a form of organization. Now, science emerges beginning around 2000 BC in Mesopotamia, but it becomes more abstract with the Greeks around 500 BC. Then we have to wait a long time for the next language, which is computing. Computing starts in 1870 when the International Business Machine Company, better known as IBM, were punching holes into cards in order to process data